WUSB, Stony Brook.
Everything is broken.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. We started with Tim O'Brien's version of our theme today, just to shake it up a little, for one, and secondly, to gain an extra minute, to be honest, because I've got some things at the front end of the program. I'm Jim Lynch, your host. You're listening to WSB Stony Brook Radio Free Long Island, 90.1 FM. Serving eastern Long Island and southern Connecticut from the beautiful campus of Stony Brook University. Our show today is going to focus on the nation state of Texas, and our featured guest is Lori Spencer. She is a journalist, and she's terrific. You're going to enjoy her. She's a contributing editor at This Can't Be Happening. Her work can be seen regularly on Counterpunch and Op-Ed News. She also writes about music and politics for Yahoo News and Yahoo Music News and Yahoo News UK. So that's Lori Spencer, and she's coming to us from Austin, Texas. She's also a musician and songwriter and has played in a variety of blues, rock, and jazz bands over the last quarter century. LoriSpencer.wordpress.com for some of her writing. All right, and also you can go to thiscan'tbehappening.net. Tell us a little bit about your rock and roll pals there. I do want to hear about the Kennedy Center. You had an exclusive interview with Led Zeppelin. You've interviewed them before.
Several times, yeah.
And you
but only the individual members. This was my first time to actually sit down with all three, or all four, because Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, was there too.
And he actually
I have known the individual members of Led Zeppelin since I first started as a journalist in 1986. The first one I met was Jimmy Page. I interviewed him when he was with a group called The Firm with Paul Rogers of Bad Company, and interviewed them a couple of times, and then interviewed Jimmy when he was on his solo tour in the late 80s. And Robert Plant, I met him about the same time, interviewed Robert Plant several times throughout the course of his solo career, did attend one of the Led Zeppelin reunions and covered that one in 1988 when they reunited for a one-off show at Madison Square Garden in New York for the Atlantic Records 40th anniversary party. But they didn't do so well that night. You know, admittedly, and the members of Led Zeppelin will tell you this, that was not their finest hour. They hadn't had much rehearsal. They hadn't played together in, 8 years.
Yeah.
John Bonham had passed away, and they weren't happy with the way that reunion turned out, and neither were their fans.
Yeah.
They just weren't on form that night, and they felt like they owed their fans something better. So it took a long time, but 9 years later, or make that almost 20 years later, 2007,
wow,
they announced a reunion concert. It's going to happen one time and one time only in London at the O2 Arena. And the tickets were available through internet lottery. You had to go to LedZeppelin.com and register. More than 20 million requests for tickets came in. It was the biggest ticket lottery in world history. 20 million people applied for tickets.
Huh.
Wow. So this one concert was huge, and 5 years have passed since the O2 reunion. It was so well received. Everyone was going, well, when do we get a CD? When do we get a film? Something for the rest of us, the 20 million who couldn't get tickets. When do we get to see it?
Right.
So just last year, Jimmy Page and the members of Led Zeppelin edited together the footage they had of the reunion concert, and they put this out as a DVD, CD, and Blu-ray set called Celebration Day. And it's just basically the long-awaited Led Zeppelin reunion concert that we've all been praying for. And, not only have I been covering Led Zeppelin for 27 years, I'm also a fan. So I wanted to see this reunion happen, and I couldn't travel to London.
Right.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to go see the show at the O2. So I was really excited to see the Celebration Day film as well.
Great.
And it was dynamite. It was just incredible. And I wrote quite a bit about that for Yahoo and covered the release of Celebration Day and interviewed the members of Led Zeppelin. But then we got an added bonus in December of last year. They were awarded the Kennedy Center honors.
Right.
Which is pretty astonishing that an English rock band
right.
that, you know, they all grew up idolizing American rhythm and blues and American rock and roll, and
yep.
it's what made them want to play music in the first place. And here is our country giving them one of the highest honors that we can pay a performing artist, the Kennedy Center honors.
Yep.
So I had the opportunity. I felt like this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. This is not going to happen again. This is a moment, you know, actually getting to meet the President of the United States. That's a big deal. So
yep,
I had the opportunity to travel to Washington and cover the whole thing. I was there for 4 or 5 days, covered all the various festivities and the reception at the White House, you know, when Obama greeted the members of Led Zeppelin and Buddy Guy.
Yep.
And Buddy Guy was another great moment for me, because I've loved Buddy Guy all my life, and
yep.
he's one of the unsung heroes of the blues. And it was wonderful to see him finally getting his just due from his country and from this nation's first black president.
Yeah.
That was really, really inspiring.
That's special.
It was one of those moments where you set politics aside.
Yep.
You know, I'm no great fan of Barack Obama, and I'm not shy to say that. But on the other hand, I didn't feel that that was an opportunity for me to lay into the president or hit him with some hard questions. You know, this was about the performing arts. It wasn't about the war. It wasn't about anything else. This was about honoring, you know, Dustin Hoffman and David Letterman and Led Zeppelin and Natalia Makarova and Buddy Guy.
Yep.
And this was their moment in the sun. We shouldn't muddy that up with politics. It was not the time or the place.
Yep.
And that's the way Led Zeppelin felt, too, because I asked them in the interview later, I said, so why didn't you take this opportunity to a little bit, you know, give him hell about the war? And you know, they just said, because I know their personal politics. First of all, they don't discuss their personal politics with the media.
Yeah.
They've always kept politics and music separate. And they also said, you know, this really wasn't the time or the place.
Yeah.
We were honored guests at the White House. You know, we weren't going to bite the hand that feeds us.
Yep.
And that made sense to me. But after the White House ceremony and the Kennedy Center honors, we then traveled to New York the next day for a special taping of The Late Show with David Letterman, who was also a Kennedy Center honoree this year. So he got the first big exclusive interview with the surviving members of Led Zeppelin right there on the Letterman show. And what a thrill that was to be in the old Ed Sullivan Theater. That was my first time in the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Great.
Yeah, that was really a treat. So as a journalist, I can honestly say after, 27 years of writing about music, that's probably the crowning glory. That's probably like the coolest experience I will ever have. I don't know if you can top that.
No, and that's fabulous, and congrats. We've been speaking with Laurie Spencer of thiscan'tbehappening.net and Yahoo and every other journalistic outpost you can get a toehold in. And Laurie, it's been wonderful. I have to kick you to the curb. I've got a long speech I got to play here, but we're going to have you back on down the road. I have a feeling.
Tim, I enjoyed talking to you. I'd love to come back anytime.
That would be fun. And we'll let's do a little more on the arts and politics. I like the synergy between the two, and let's do some of that and whatever you're writing about at the time. So don't be surprised if the phone rings down the road.